Are we good to go? Vane will be presenting. Okay, let's then get started. Welcome to the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee public hearing on the Strategic Fuels Fund Association's tariff application, which is SSF for short. The application is for its petroleum storage and loading facilities at Saldanha Bay, spanning the period of 1st April 2022 to March 2023 financial year. My name is Muzim Kize. I'm the full-time regulator member, primarily responsible for petroleum pipelines regulation. I am the chairperson of the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee and will be chairing this public hearing. I would like to introduce the other members of the panel in the person of Advocate Nomalanga Stole, the Chief Executive Officer and also a member of the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee, PPS. They are all going to join us virtually. If we may just greet the audience this side as well as online.
Oh, okay. Good morning, everyone that is attending this particular public hearing, presenters, and as well as our applicant. You're welcome. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Advocate Stole. I also have got Mr. Fungai Sibanda, who is a part-time regulator member, as well as the member of the PPS subcommittee, also joining us virtually. Over to you, Mr. Sibanda.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome and thank you for attending the hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Sibanda. I proceed to Madam Tembega Semane, who is a part-time regulator member and a member of the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee, joining us virtually also.
Thank you very much, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
Thank you very much, Madam Semane. I would also like to apologize for the other members of the subcommittee who could not join this public hearing in the name of Mr. Nhlanhla Kumede, as well as Madam Nomfundo Maseti. This public hearing was duly advertised in the following newspapers: nationally, the BELT on the 16th of August 2022, and independent newspapers on the 16th of August 2022 also. It was also posted on our website, and it is held in accordance with the Energy Regulator Act, in which affected parties are given an opportunity to submit their views and present relevant facts and evidence to the energy regulator. This hearing is governed by the NERSA rules on public hearings, which can be summarized as follows. 1, all parties would be required to make their representations under oath. 2, presenters have been allocated 15 minutes each. I have made an exception here, noting the request that emanated from OTMS to request for a 30 minutes slot, because they've got 3 presenters on specific issues, which will then require them to be given an average of 30 minutes each. The third one is that only members of the panel may ask questions to the presenters. However, members of the public may forward their questions to patience.maswanganye@nersa.org.za. Patience Maswanganye is the Secretariat for the Petroleum Pipeline Subcommittee. Those who are in the room may just also give written comments on paper. The panel then will decide on how to deal with those questions. Fourthly and lastly, should presenters wish to present information they consider confidential, the panel will make a ruling on whether to close the hearing or to have the information submitted in writing. The recording of this hearing will be done through our recording system and will also be a live audio streaming on NERSA's Twitter page, which is at NERSA_ZA, which will be the official record of this meeting. The House rules for this meeting are as follows. 1, please switch your cell phones to silent mode or hold them totally off. Secondly, please ensure that your mic and video are switched off at all times unless you are making a presentation. Thirdly, please use the chat responsibly to contribute to a meaningful discussion through the public hearing session. Please, we don't want a situation where there is a virtual or online heckling. Let us respect one another's views. We have the following 5 presenters for today's public hearing, and each presenter will be given time as already indicated earlier on. I have Mr. Mzwake Ngwane, who will be representing the Strategic Fuel Fund Association, SFF. Also, I have Mr. Stephen Glover and Madam Nonhlanhla Taylor that have been given to me, as well as Celeste, who will be presenting all 3 of them on behalf of OTMS, which is all taking mocks. Just want to get Mzwake then to step forward, so we may start. Is Mzwake there? Because it would be good to start off with the SFF, who are the which is the applicant.
Yes, I'm online. Can you hear me? Good morning.
We can hear you. May you please just show your face so that we can be able to go through the process of taking the oath to proceed with your presentation. Okay, I would just like to know from your side if you do have any objection in taking the oath.
I have no objection to take the oath.
Okay, please raise your hand and affirm the following. You solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
For the record, please state your name, company, and the designation therein.
My name is Mzwake Ngwane. I work for SFF Strategic Fuel Fund. My boss to the company is Capital Projects Executive.
Thank you very much. You may then proceed to present, and I'll give you your 20 minutes. My request from you is please ensure that you also got pen and paper to take questions afterwards. And if anyone is going to assist you in taking or responding to the questions, please just get just alert me so that you can also get that person sworn in, and we may proceed from there. Over to you then. Your 20 minutes starts right now.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to come and join the public hearing in response to the submission opposing our tariff application by TMS. I would like my presentation. I will briefly start with try to touch on the history of this application. SFF in Saldanha Bay own storage tanks that were meant to keep or store the standing stocks, and post 1994 the standing stocks was reduced in such a way that only 2 tanks are required to keep the government standing stocks, and therefore the rest of the tanks we started letting them off international trading entities and the local refinery, which took the tank and connected to their refinery. And of course, with time, we saw the development of another storage facility next to ours, that is OTMS, and which means that we have now to share some of the facilities or infrastructure. The main one being the offloading facility.
Excuse me, Mr. Ngwan. If you may
Yes,
just
sir.
try to speak more to the mic so that we can hear clear, because the room is big, the sound is kind of wobbly. Please just to speak closer to the mic. Thank you.
Let me try it. I don't know that it's because I'm also having the camera on, because it does create some problems.
You may switch your camera off so long, and so that we can assist you, because the voice projection is off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And so we, as I indicated, we therefore have now as the second terminal, crude oil terminal, that is operating next to us, 2 hours, which we do share the infrastructure, mainly the offloading facilities and the pipeline. And going now to the and of course, that requires that we have a tariff license or rate that will be used for the common use of the facility. And this application that we're discussing today, or that is on hearing today, we started the first submission in March 2021. That was 12 months after OTMS started the operations, which was around April 2020, and we do acknowledge the fact that the tariff application should have been at least submitted or sort of published by 6 months before their operations, and I will touch on that later on. And then, but the application was denied in February 2022, and with the reasons being that there was some information that could not be submitted on time. And it is, as I gave the history of SFF, important to know that this was the only operation that really interfaced with the local operations, and and also even the customers, the international customers, and as much as we, as an operating asset, it is important that we should have met all the requirements of NESA. The tariff was not something that we required, because there was no entity that would have sort of needed us to get the tariff in order for them to determine whether it was really a fair cost that they had to pay, as we only had customers that needed to store in our crude oil, and those contracts were mainly negotiated in utilizing the international methodologies, etc. So in February 2022, when then we got the NESA communication, we immediately put a team that will undo this, as it was accepted. It was really clear to the government that this is not acceptable. We cannot be operating a facility without a NESA approved tariff. So when we started the process again, we sort of experienced a delay, as we had to convert our existing license from 3 licenses at the time. We had the license of storage, pipeline, loading facilities, and these had to be converted into 2. That's the storage and that is the storage and the loading facility with an auxiliary pipeline. So we had to combine the pipeline and the loading facility due to the small length of our pipeline, and being mainly used for offloading purposes. And the license was then approved in July 2022, which then led to us now to be able to publish the tariff application, that is on the 16th of August. And so that's one of the reasons why this tariff application, even though it's in 22-23, it's for the 22-23 financial year, it went out to the publication so late than the normal timetable of the timelines that are set up by NESA. Now, going to the application and the responses that were sent to us from OTMS, we did receive the OTMS submission, and on our side, we then took the position that we would be submitting to the regulator and respond within the stipulated timelines, which was 30 days from the 26th. And we won't be responding to some allegations, for example, the one of incompetency, the one of not following the NESA processes, or what else, as we believe that the whole application was done through NESA, and these will have been brought up and highlighted by NESA at the time of the application. But we will, however, provide or respond or make any changes as when NESA requires us to do. And what we will be focusing on, especially in today's hearing, is to respond to some and provide some clarity on some of the data that has been received from OTMS, which we believe that they will be presenting today. And this will be more focused on 5 areas. One is around the operating expenses. The other one is around the volume throughput. and the infrastructure that they believe that some belongs to Transnet, not to SFF. Also the what we saw to be misinformed staff compliments, and of course our investments at the jetty. So those are the areas that we will be responding to, and the part of our submission later to NESA will really be providing a lot of clarity and information on those. And in closing, I would like to say that as SFF, we've been working hard to make sure that we get to the finality, the tariff for the Saldanha terminal. And we do acknowledge that there might have been some wrong decisions that were taken in the past that led us not to be having a tariff at the moment. But since receiving the letter from the CEO of NESA, we've been working hard to make sure that there must be a tariff for the port, and it is really for the reasons that we are no longer operating alone. We do have a competitor next to us, and we have to respect the regulator because it exists, to make sure that we can operate as competitors in the same port. And we believe that we need and we can coexist with the OTMS. We don't sort of see any reasons why we should be, as alleged, their submissions shutting them down. That is not in our interest, and we believe that their sustainability and the volume throughput will contribute into our sustainability as well, because we operate the loading facilities. We have the pipeline that will be utilized more with them coming into the and operating the same area. It is therefore important to us that we really land the tariff so that both companies can focus on growing their business and be sustainable in this market. Thank you, sir. That was my opening presentation. Thank you.
Applicant in particular is not making a written presentation, like in the form of some Microsoft presentations, because it makes it less. Members, I'd just like to give you the opportunity then to ask him, presenter, Mr. Ngwane. I will, Mr. Ngwane, just get your pen and paper and take a round of questions. By show of hands, members. Any questions? Mr. Sibanda, you may ask the questions, please.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Mr. Ngwane, for the introductory remarks and the presentation of the issues. You have admitted that your application actually is a bit late for this current. Now, I just wanted to check with you, is there a particular reason why you have not considered perhaps making a multi-year application? And if this application were to be approved, when do you intend making your next tariff application? Because as you rightly indicated, you're not supposed to. I think it would be prudent to ensure that there is always a tariff that is approved by the regulator. But I wanted to check with you really whether you've considered the possibility of doing a multi-year tariff application. Now, coming to the calculation of the RAB value, and as you would know, our methodology requires that only those assets that are used, usable, useful, should be admitted into for purposes of calculating the allowable revenue. Can you confirm, especially with respect to the loading facility, how many loading arms are operational, and are all of those loading arms owned by SFF? We also understand that one of the loading arms is being refurbished. What is the expected date for bringing that loading arm back to into operation? And would it be prudent to still allow it into the RAB for this particular application? And then regarding the OPEX, perhaps if you could just talk to us regarding perhaps the justification or the reasoning behind the substantial difference in terms of your OPEX, having regard to your previous application compared to your current application. So there appears to be a huge jump from what you had considered to be perhaps your operational costs a few years ago, and what you are considering to be, your operational costs in this particular application. Why this vast difference? What factors have you taken into account? Maybe if you can just talk to us regarding that. Chairperson, maybe let me stop here. I'll probably then come back with for another round of questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibanda. Advocate Stoll.
Chairperson, and thanks to Mr. Ngwane in terms of his presentation. As you have indicated, Chair, it's difficult just to direct the questions now that we didn't have a presentation. But I'll just want to get one clarity in relation to what they have submitted in their application, which is the issue of the oil pollution costs. I just want to find out, how does this particular cost linked, or how they linked it to their regulated activities? If you can just explain to us how they have ended up including this particular cost, Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Any other question? Okay. If none, let me maybe before you respond, also just pose a few from my side, Mr. Ngwane. Again, reiterating the fact that it's very difficult when you don't have a presentation that makes referencing much easier. But with regard to the assets and the regulatory asset base, we'd just like to know if there are any assets that have been transferred to TNPA upon the lapse of the concession period, and to know if they have been included in the RAB, the regulatory asset base or not, and also to get the understanding as to what the issue raised earlier by my colleagues in terms of the operationalization of the loading arms, noting our prudency guidelines in terms of those assets that are useful and usable. That is one. And then two, your view on the eligibility of cost of equity adjustments, like this state-owned entity in the SAFE, to know the view or why would that be reasonable to make such adjustments, right? And then the third thing from my side is to understand how you have allocated the cost between storage and loading facilities. How you have separated that? What principles have you separated these costs, and how justifiable are these? And the reason behind this is now the last question, is the reason behind strategic stocks volume not being included not including them as inventory as such in determining the tariff. So we just like to get clarity on those questions from our side. Respond to these questions, and then if you feel that you need to augment some of them, you are free to do that within 7 days from the date of this public hearing. Over to you, Mr. Ngwan. Mr. Ngwane, can you hear me? I don't know whether it's just on my side there, but I can't hear you, Mr. Ngwane. Are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm still on the line. I was just trying to get the mic on. Thank you, sir. I really aim to apologize that we did not prepare a presentation, because we had a different understanding of this session for today. But what we'll try to do is that, because we did have some slides that we're going to be responding on after the OTMS presentation, so we'll try to cover some of the stuff there. But in terms of the questions that have been asked now, the first one on the multi-year, as I did acknowledge the timelines that we went through, and the first thing that we felt we needed to consider is that this tariff actually being application before the 2023-24 financial year, there will of course be some quite a lot of amendments to take into account the costs for 2023-24. So we already saying that the tariff has hit the timelines for this financial year. Multi-year, yes, we will sort of look at that and get some sort of some advice in that line. And but looking at how our sort of the items that goes to the model, it should not be make a big difference, because our items are quite steady items when it comes to costs, except the areas of the assets, which I'm going to touch on. So in terms of the assets that have considered for this application, we went into detail in listing the assets that we have at.
Sorry there, Mr. Ngwane. I did not get you clearly when it comes to the issue of the first question on the lateness of the application. Can you just maybe just talk directly to that?
Yes, the question was whether we are considering making it a multi-year application. Also, the fact that it's actually already being sort of made for the next financial year, and or when are we starting 2020 towards the end of 2023. So what we're saying is that because October we're supposed to start with the 23-24 financial year, we will be immediately submitting for the 23-24 financial year, and depending now on the finalization of the process that we're in today. If the process takes longer, therefore we will understand if this financial year we are not awarded clearance, which is starting in October. So that is my answer. And the multi-year submission, I'm saying that we have not yet made a decision on the multi-year. We will have to get some advice on that and make a decision on it.
Please then also respond to that issue in your National Energy Regulator within 7 days from the date of this public hearing.
Okay. Thank you.
You may proceed.
Okay, the next question is around the assets that we have considered. The assets that have been used in terms of for this application, SFF and the ports. If I take on the loading and the auxiliary pipelines, we're talking pipelines, we're talking a system, which is the form. We're talking of the slopes. We're talking of the loading arms with the gateways. So these are the assets that, and we have a list of them with their auxiliary sort of equipment as well, because there are these valves and pumps that we're talking about. So it's not including the Transnet equipment, which is utilized for that activity. Now there are some assets that at the moment we're not all. One of those assets, one is the loading arms and the crude sampling, and those are the two sort of major equipments that we are out in the market to replace. The crude oil sampler is the one that we must replace. The loading arms, we're busy working on replacing them. Currently, we have 3 loading arms at the port. The 3 loading arms are meant to discharge vessels at 10,000 cubes an hour. If we use 2 instead of 3, our discharge rate reduces to 3,500, 8,500, and basically that's the rate that currently we are discharging it because we only have 2 loading arms connected. The 3rd loading arm was taken out because initially we had a plan to refurbish. There was a service provider that was going to be refurbishing the loading arms. Unfortunately, with the COVID in 2020, they could not come down to do the work. So the loading arm was never refurbished. So it is the 2 loading, as I said, the loading arms at the moment, they have no value on the assets, and what we have included is the capex budget, which is what we were going to be spending to replace the 2 loading arms, because we were replacing 2 loading arms. As we did not have budget to do the 3rd one is going to be refurbished. So on the budget side, that is on the money to be spent, and so that's for the 2 loading arms and for the crude oil assembler. So that's what we have in the assets. But on our submission, that is in terms of the 3rd question on the OPEX, the huge jump. The huge jump we did see it also ourselves when we looked and responded to the question. What happened during on the last iteration of the submission? This is where we think this will have happened, is that we were reminded of the missing cost of rehabilitation that was not showing on the numbers, and SFF has always been putting the sort of the costs on our balance sheet, and of course after that, NESA did alert us to the processes, and the business, of course, as I said, that we're working so hard to meet all the requirements of NESA. We have started the process of setting up a trust, because that's what has been approved, so that the money is set up in a trust. So what we saw to be the error in that OPEX is that the total amount, which was 210 million, 200 we had for both storage and the jetty, was included as an annual OPEX, and that's what changed the sort of the operating cost. So if you look at our first submission, the operating costs were not sitting in those numbers. So that is the one error that we saw with the costs. But the rest of the costs and their split, they don't change as they come direct from the budgets of the terminal, the JT, etc. Numbers, we sort of confirm them that they've been correct. So they've been an adjustment, of course, of on our side, to make sure that that number is divided by the number of years as suggested, and as put up in the NESA model. So that is one area of the huge cost, and our total cost, I think, at the moment is OPEX is sitting at 108 million. Versus the chart and something that accounted the annual portion of the rehab and the abandonment cost as confirmed by the work that was done towards the end of the financial year. And now going to the fourth question, the OPC cost. OPC costs are included as the loading, part of the loading and offloading costs, because that's where the costs sit. And then we in our submission we sort of demonstrate this as really it's a section of our operations. There might have been decisions that were taken in the past to separate it, but actually you just cannot take it away from our operations. For one item, out of the 24 staff that you have in these operations, 12 of them they are doing a shift work. They do they work 24 hours. And the main reason for that is to man the pipelines and the loading arms for any spillage that can happen. In fact, that team in July 2020, that started at night because of their sort of monitoring of any leaks at night. So they have it's 3 people on 4 shifts, and they're in the boat, and you require that because those are the areas where the normal operator that is at the jetty side cannot access and see by just walking around. So you need the boat to go under the jetty as our pipelines are going there. So the 50% of that already they do those operations. Therefore, you need them to be at work 24 hours a day. So that is our cost. And then the rest of the The rest of the staff, they come in, they're on standby, come in to offload the vessels, and that is actually not different to the operation setup at the terminal, because you've got the shift supervisors that only come in when offloading the vessels. So during the day, if there are no vessels, they are not doing much work other than the administration, and during the night they are on standby in case there is any vessel that needs to be operated. And as for the oil production team, they're on standby in case there is a spillage. Then they come and provide that support. So this is basically an OPC, called an OPC because of history, but actually it's a section of the terminal, and that is how we intend to keep it. And now in terms of the assets that are transferred to 10PA, that will be the other infrastructure, mainly the fixed infrastructure that will have gone to 10PA, as it normally happens with the ports. So our infrastructure is just the flexible or the stuff that is movable, that we use for offloading activities. So we don't include any equipment on the 10PA. And then in terms of how do we split the costs of storage and the jetty? Well, the costs for manpower, it's really based on because that's a major cost. It's really based on where the individuals are based. They're in the storage, they're in the jetty facility. But then you get the roles that will be under storage, but they will be based at the jetty. Like they will be operation activity, an operator at the jetty. That is part of the storage, because their role is to work with the storage, and then the jetty. It will be those roles, which is really just a security and one operator. Then they will be and what we find that was missing from the submission from OTMS, that if you have a one workstation for an operator, for instance, and a one workstation for a security, what it means is that there are 4 people that we employ for that particular workstation, and there are other, so it's 8 people that you see as 2, and similar goes to the other jetty staff. So that's the manpower we do as per what activities they are doing, where they are related to. And then in terms of the maintenance, and this is one area that, again, we felt that it was misguided, because if you look at our equipment, we found that most of our equipment, especially the valves, the pumps, all this equipment that requires inspection services and stuff, they are sitting at the jetty side. And as much as the maintenance team is based at the terminal buildings, they come down to do maintenance at the jetty. But for the sake of this submission, we actually only limited their cost to around 35%. And as we improve the submissions and we will use the actual data, we believe that it should be actually be higher than that, because including the vehicle costs, because they use the vehicles to go down to the jetty, they use fuel to go down to the jetty side. But those are the actual costs that OTMS will not have seen, that we see on our side. But those small items are the ones that require the maintenance servicing, the inspection they are doing. So those are the answers. I hope that I did provide some answers, and I will can indicate if there is any that I missed. Then I'll try to come back to it as well. Okay, I was reminded on the strategic stocks question. Okay, on the strategic stock, I think that talks Chair, to the volume calculation. We do have in our submission what we believe should be the volume calculation, and also we try to show that the number that has been submitted of a storage of volume throughput of 184 million is really unfounded. It cannot be achieved by that terminal. But when it comes to the what can be throughputed into our terminal, it's a difference of what is sitting, the tanks that are occupied by strategic stocks, less the total available volume, which is currently that's 4 tanks, and those tanks are the ones that we see in any given time. They should be there can be a throughput that goes through those tanks, and OTM's submission that should be looked at as it will happen when there is the market is favoring the storage of crude, which is the contango. We do look at that in our submission, and actually we used the example of the deepest contango you can ever get, which is one that we got during the COVID, where the crude oil prices, went to zero negative, and that's the deepest ever we can get. And that period showed us the capability of the Saldanha terminal, and how much volumes that we can be able to take in, and which will be talking to the maximum volumes that we can throughput. In short, without going into that detail, when we looked at the work that was done and published for us on the ocean study for the terminal, and looking at the factors that have been recorded for the Saldanha, the availability of that terminal is set at around 91%, and basically that's what that factors were saying. And when we looked at the maximum vessels that we took in 2020, we found that we were only able to take 7 vessels, the highest of the COVID, which is the April, and those vessels, the last 3 vessels, they had to incur an average of around 20 days, waiting for the opportunity to waiting for the next vessel to go in. And if you look at the rest of the months, the demurrage for each vessel is even going above 30 days. So the issue of wind, the issue of swells for that terminal makes it impossible to do the kind of throughputs that OTML said can be done. But the detail of that, we've put it in our document, where we say from the ocean studies that we done, And that's the kind of factors that that we have, and also on the actual performance during COVID, and that is also the numbers that we managed to get, because for that period, all the boat storage facilities was full, and those are the numbers that we've responded to. So in terms of our application, we took into account two things. We took into account the fact that the Cape Town refinery was the shutdown, and we took into account the dates that it will be back on operation, and that gave us 9 months for the financial year 22-23, and then they put into that refinery. So that is the volume that has been used for the application. If we have to go to a normal year, 12 months, that volume will be 24 months, when the refinery will be available for 24 months. That's the assumption that you will have taken. And then the rest of the volume will then be filled up if when the market goes to Condago. But again, the maximum average per annum that can be done by the terminal is actually 3 vessels versus the 2 vessels. So you talk of moving between 24 million barrels to 36 million barrels. Now the question that we have to ask that how many times do you get to be in that deep Condago? And that will be once every 5 years. And if you use that average every year, is that a fake calculation? We believe as SFF that it is not, because we're using an average, the highest point that will occur once in every 5 years, and hence that's why we utilizing the throughput that goes to the refinery in Cape Town. We're hoping that once we sort of operate, the market stabilizes, the economy stabilizes, that we will be both SFF and OTMS develop the markets that won't be dependent on the falling of the prices, and the markets that will talk to, for instance, the blending for refineries, so that even if the prices are not in Condago, we should get volumes coming in, blending, supplying refineries, because that's what we think will be of assistance. That is my last question, my answer to the question, sir.
Okay, thank you. If there are no follow-up questions, members, I would like to just thank you, Mr. Ngwane, for your responses, and request that if you want to augment your verbal responses, please do so by sending your written submissions in 7 days' time from today's date. And then also, if you may assist by delineating the costs that are associated with the oil pollution cost item. Also, do provide us with contracts. If you can send to NERSA the contracts, particularly the contract with the OTMS, in terms of looking at that from a point of view of compliance. That would be appreciated. I'll leave it at that. We will still have an opportunity to have your last say once the presentation by OTMS has been done, and we request also that you just in that response try your utmost to be brief and to the point to matters in the interest of time. Having said that, thank you very much. We'll then proceed and get a presentation from OTMS.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
If you can just help me then with the order from your side.
And then it will be online, Celeste.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any objections in taking the oath?
No.
Okay. Please raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
Yes.
For the record, please state your name, your company, and your designation therein.
My name is Nonhlanhla Taylor. I represent OTMS and I'm the CEO of OTMS.
You've got your all of you. You've got your 30 minutes. I think maybe it's going to be best if I swear all of you in so that you can then pace yourselves and just go through the presentations. Do you have any objection in taking the oath?
I do not.
Please raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence you are going to give this panel is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
For the record, please state your name, company, and your designation therein.
It's Stephen Glover, OTMS, CFO.
Thank you very much. Let me proceed then to Celeste. Celeste, I know that you have been told you are online. Do you have any objections in taking the oath? If you can just unmute yourself, please.
I do not have any objections. Apologies for that.
Thank you. Please raise your hand and affirm the following. Do you solemnly declare that the evidence in your designation therein?
My name is Celeste Renault. I am at a company called Meridian Economics and I'm representing OTMS at this hearing. I'm an analyst at Meridian.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, I'm gonna go back then to Madam Taylor, who is with us in the room here. Madam Taylor, you just do your presentation and you hand over. I won't come in anywhere. And then at the end, we will then have to have your pens and paper ready to take questions from our side. And then once we've exhausted our questions in terms of that round of questions, you will then provide us with response, and it's going to be up to you as to who you choose to respond to which question. Thank you.
Understood,
Over to you
Chair.
then. Your 30 minutes starts from now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to everyone in the room and online. I actually believe that Mr. Ngwane has done a good job of doing the first part of this presentation. I do want to say that it's unfortunate that we didn't receive SFF's responses to our objections earlier, because it would have helped this piece of presentation to be more robust. And so this piece of presentation is then naturally based on what we had, which is the first application. And we'll take it from there and we'll do our best to keep the narrative explicit and short and succinct. And thank you for the time, Chair. So this is our business. OTMS is not a strategic fuel storage facility. If you're not strategic, you either contango or you linked to a refinery. We are fundamentally a contango client, which means we understand in our business model and in our investment portfolio that we make money when the market is in contango, and in backwardated cycles, we don't make money. Why is this important? This is important because it goes back to this concept of a multi-tariff year. There is no other way that you will be able to ensure that there is stability and predictability to a tariff if you simply decide, as as SFF that we're going to take this year and we're going to make certain assumptions. There's a history to this, there's a cycle to this, it's well known, it can be applied, and it can be used to be an input to a tariff that is more predictable. We're not here because we don't want SFF to have a tariff. In fact, it is in our interest for SFF to have a tariff, but that tariff must be economical, it must be globally competitive, and it must ensure that we as OTMS and any player for that market is not locked out simply because it uses certain assumptions at a certain point in a cycle that really are not informative of the long-term cycle of the nature of our business. I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about this as the CEO of OTMS. We're here today because we believe that the regulator's job is to promote competition, equitable access, and facilitate investment. OTMS is a 2-year-old crude storage and blending facility. We employ 32 people. We will do everything in our power to ensure that this tariff is equitable, to ensure that this tariff doesn't. Yes, we are SFF's competitor, but we are competitors in the global world. When crude comes to our terminal, unlike when finished product is imported in South Africa and it then ends up in the market, floating in the market in our vehicles, crude actually gets exported. It goes somewhere else. If you lock us out and you set a tariff this high, as SFF has put in their application, I can guarantee you, no one is going to invest. Why? Because the tariff they're requesting is multiple times higher than the tariff for our entire storage facility. Our entire storage facility is 3.5 billion rand investment. The investment into this facility is about 150 million. Doesn't make sense. It's not economical. The method that they've used, whatever that method is not bringing out an outcome that is competitive and that allows us to access the market. Having said all of this, I believe, why are we here? As I said, Mr. Chair, it is in our interest for SFF to have a tariff. But that application must be compliant. It has to be a compliant application because all licensees have to do that. The current application, there is no rational basis for NERSA to approve the current application as it is. It has material errors and exclusions, as my counterparts will show very explicitly. The loading tariff calculation doesn't contemplate the throughput capacity, which conflicts with the regulation. And the application that is being requested here by SFF to NERSA is to approve a tariff for a profit-generating company. SFF is not. They are a strategic company. They are not for profit. They might have in 1994 taken a different decision strategically, but as we speak today, they are registered as a not-for-profit organization, and that is how they must be viewed today. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Round things roll. Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. Thank you, sir. To start off, we just wanted to reiterate again that the basis of our objection is not in isolation, but rather rests on 4 regulatory pillars. And each relates to subsequent elements that we want to focus on and that this presentation will focus on, and again is elaborated in detail in our written application. Specifically, Section 10 of the Petroleum Pipelines Act, which says that a fair process requires reasonable access to relevant information. If the affected stakeholders are denied sufficient information to meaningfully assess the application, the process falls outside the fairness provisions of the Act. I won't go into the detail here just for the sake of time, but that is underlined again, as NT advised, we would have benefited from some information prior to this process. Section 4 of the Petroleum Pipelines Act, SFF is incorporated as a non-profit company in terms of Section 13 of the Companies Act. So if NERSA approves a tariff that allows for SFF to make a profit, in other words, a non-zero real equity return, such approval would fall foul of Section 4J of the Petroleum Pipelines Act. And we just want to bring that to your attention. Section 20 of the Petroleum Pipelines Regulation, the Act contemplates proportional access to loading capacity based on requirements to meet third party. So a tariff that results in a third party paying for a greater proportion of costs, as their proposal would need, contradicts the intent of this open access provision. And we'll elaborate again on all four of these points during the course of this presentation. And then finally, Section 5, approval of tariffs for loading facilities. The throughput of the capacity of loading facilities, we see that loading tariffs cannot merely be based on storage volumes of the SFF facility, as appears to be the case. Failure to take into account the full throughput capacity results in third parties being disproportionately sharing the costs. So again, this is, I'm speaking to the experts here, but our entire objection are based on these four principles. Just to get the more mundane elements out of the way, and for the sake of time, just want to refer back to the detail in the written submission, which lists all the items. The first element that we want to just talk about is, again, it has been alluded to in the presentation previously. SFF is requesting NERSA to approve a retrospective tariff, which is contrary to Rule 12.6. And then there are also a couple of a host of information that has been omitted, we believe, in error, which includes explanation of the elements of the WACC, explanation of the net working capital, disclosure of RAB. We note that the regulatory asset base detail purportedly has been provided, but we don't have the detail to really have that information, and the questions to that have already highlighted the fact that more information is required. Similarly, useful life of assets has not been provided. So without this information, stakeholders such as us, such as OTMS, cannot meaningfully comment, rendering the process procedurally unfair. And we would advise or request that more information is made available. So again, these are not our opinions, but rather statements of fact, and in contradictory to the rules and regulations. And just another compliance element that is quite critical. We found various internal errors and inconsistencies in the submission. And here we see extracts from the application, Table 12 and Table 10. You see in Table 12 an allowable revenue amount for the loading facility of 191 million, and in Table 10 allowable revenue amount of 152. And there's this 40 million rand that arrives without any explanation of what that is, and it has a material impact on the tariff. And we just want to bring the committee to note this, please. Operational assets, again, we have it has been discussed, but to reiterate that as of the 4th of October 2022, only 2 loading arms were operational. So we believe currently it's still the case, and that impacts the regulatory asset base, we believe, by as much as 7%, which is material and significantly impacts the tariff. OPEX, as members of the committee, I think Mr. Sabanda queried the inflation of the operational costs, which we also noted in the application. And specifically, there are 2 ways that we really looked at the operational costs, which is probably the primary driver of the tariff. The first is by comparing it to the previous tariff application that we had access to, and we can see that the application for in comparing like for like 2022 rands with 2022 rands, we would have expected the total operational cost to be in the order of 93 million rand, when in fact the submitted amount is 303 million rand, which is significantly more, in fact, three times more in real terms, and no explanation has been provided. That immediately indicates that there's a good chance that the OPEX has been inflated. And then secondly, the second method that we evaluated OPEX is OTMS is in a maybe somewhat unique position where we intuitively understand the costs associated with operating such a facility in Saldanha Bay. On review of these purported costs, it is clear that there's an overstatement of total costs. Only efficient attributable costs should be recoverable. And even so, improper allocation of total costs between the storage facility and the loading facilities should be assessed and addressed, and proper allocation mechanism be allocated or used. So on that allocation mechanism, you can see here on that in their table 7, which I've reproduced, you see the allocation column on the right-hand side clearly shows that the various elements, that the total cost, the 303 million, has simply been allocated between the storage and the loading facilities. Table 7 says jetty and pipeline, but we assume that jetty and pipeline to in fact be the storage facilities and just be an error in detail. But they've simply allocated around 30%, which does not seem correct to me. The primary purpose of the SFF facility is strategic storage. The loading facility is an essential concomitant of the storage system, but the bulk of the costs are then associated with storage, and we would expect to see that. With SFF allocating 30% of the total purported cost to loading facility without a basis of allocation. I would present that each line item should be allocated to the component, be that either storage or loading, on an actual attributable cost basis. So the actual cost, looking at the underlying drivers. And only those elements for which an actual cost driver cannot fairly be determined could the cost then be proportionately allocated or potentially omitted in its entirety. If you aren't able to find a driver that allocates that cost to the loading facility, then potentially that cost should not be applied to the loading facility at all. So in the absence of a direct allocation, how does one go about it? How could you then allocate these general costs? And we propose that a RAB weighting, a regulatory asset base weighting, could be a fair weighting. And in the absence of anything else, in the absence of any information, we believe it probably the only and the upper element of the weighting that could be applied. Table 10 provided here on screen, you'll see shows that 156 million of the 2.9 billion rand total consolidated RAB is allocated to, or relates to the loading facility. So that's 5.3. And one could, and I propose that 5.3 would be the most reasonable expectation that should be used to allocate costs between the two elements rather than some arbitrary 30%. So we can apply that without really digging into it any deeper. But on looking at each line item that has been provided, I've listed them here on screen again. Labor, it's been alluded to again. And yes, we take note of the fact that there are potentially 8 members of staff and not 6, as we had considered. But even so, the cost, that direct cost attributable to loading could not be in the order of, what was the original order, 30 million rand for 8 members of staff. If we apply the 5.3 regulatory asset base allocation, we get to 5.8 million, which is probably on the upper end. The staff we know about, direct cost would be less than 3 million rand. We thought 6 staff at 2.5, 8 staff possibly 3 million. And the balance of that could potentially be justified as general costs associated. But in the absence of explanation given, We don't know how the amount was arrived at, and we present that the 5.8 as presented is probably the upper limit. Maintenance, SFF did provide an explanation. We in fact don't have a problem with the maintenance cost. We went to market and looked at original equipment manufacturers, asked them for maintenance costs, and believe that 3 million might be a little bit inflated, but it's not materially to our utilities. The primary cost associated here with utilities, having a similar facility operating in Saldanha Bay, we know is electricity, and for all intents and purposes, that amount should be near nil as applied to the jet or the loading facility. So again, just to apply the 5.3%, the amount could equally be very close to nil, but applying the 5.3 item, insurance is calculated in a specific way. It's usually a function of the asset value multiplied by an insurance rate. So we obtained indicative rates from an international insurer, local insurer with that's also based in London, with access to international markets, and we obtained rates from them for the various elements of insurance, including physical damage, business interruption, SASRIA, etc. And they provided us with a band, and we applied the maximum band on all accounts to the regulatory asset base and arrived at a total of 807,000 Rand, as opposed to the amount that they had of 23 million Rand. So there's a massive jump there. Overheads, oil pollution control. We have mentioned this before, and it has been discussed, but this is not part of the regulatory or the regulated service. And in fact, OTMS is charged separately for that service on a volume basis. So we believe that it's double counting. In fact, that they are charging us for the service and including a non-regulated service in their OPEX calculation. So we believe that that should be omitted in its entirety. Trading costs, there was some uncertainty on our side exactly what that is. It's not quite clear. It's either general operational costs, so like staff, toiletries, cleaning, those kind of things. It could be there because we don't expressly see it elsewhere, but it could equally be the trading activities that SFF is engaged in. If it is the former, if it's just general operating costs, these costs are generally fixed per entity, regardless of the size or the storage, and regardless of the frequency of the vessel. So, but if the latter, then these costs should be excluded entirely. So it's not included, doesn't relate to loading facilities at all. But giving SFF the benefit of the doubt, we propose the 5.3 be used as discussed based on the regulatory asset-based proportion. So in summary, we're doing well. In summary, we're just listing the operational costs here, what was submitted, what was proposed, and the reason I'm doing this is just because the difference is dramatic, and I don't want the committee to believe that we are trying to explicitly just find a number or reduce it to a number that is as close to zero as possible. Each line item has been considered, and in fact, that 12.8 million Rand for total OPEX makes operational sense to us as an organization that runs a similar facility with pipelines. Our pipeline cost component is very low, and we believe that, just to summarize, total OPEX is overstated. The arbitrary allocation to the loading facility is flawed at 30%. It should be 5.3, and the line items, individual line items, have been overstated as demonstrated. I'd now like to hand over to Celeste to go through the balance of the presentation, some technical elements of WAC. Celeste, if you can continue, please.
Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, Honourable Chair and the committee for allowing me to join online. As Stephen mentioned, I'll be taking us through the rest of the presentation, with particularly looking at some of the quantitative elements in relation to the cost of capital, bringing together allowable revenue components and our revised assumptions around these, and finally looking at the impact of these revisions on the tariff. May I request next slide, please? Thank you very much. So obviously one of the key elements is the cost of capital that is utilized in the application. Once again, I'd like to reiterate the point that both Nonhlanhla and Stephen have raised, with SFF being registered as a non-profit entity under Section 13 of the Companies Act. So we do advise that NERSA seeks legal opinion to confirm the following, but certainly in our view, by implication and by definition, this would mean that SFF as a non-profit company would absolutely be able to recover and cover its efficient operational costs, but it would not be allowed to generate a return for its shareholder or shareholders. And therefore any surplus revenue that is generated would merely be able to be used to offset costs or to reduce tariffs for its customers. So by implication, for the cost of capital calculation, that would imply an cost of equity of 0% real. In the event that the company does have debt, it would be entitled to cover the cost of its debt. But importantly here, we would argue that the cost of debt should pertain only to its actual debt portion, not a notional minimum debt assumption, which it appears that the application has used, that it's used a minimum assumption of 30% gearing. But once again, there was no explicit disclosure about this particular piece of information, so we would need more evidence in order to meaningfully comment. But essentially, the importance of using the actual debt portion is that if the notional minimum debt assumption is higher than the actual debt, that would in effect result in additional revenue being generated to cover the cost of that debt, which would in essence result in a profit. So to summarize this component, we would argue that a reasonable WACC for such a non-profit entity would be between 0.66% real. This includes your 0% cost of equity, and then if indeed there is a 30% debt portion, the cost of covering that debt. But if there is no actual debt, the appropriate WACC would be 0% real. And then just to emphasize that, you know, within this range, this is orders of magnitude lower than the cost of capital which is utilized in the application, which is in the order of 12.5%. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in the event that a legal opinion does differ from our view, which we're fairly certain it will not, and that SFF is indeed entitled to a profit, we would argue that there's no realistic justification for a cost of equity that would exceed your general equity market risk premium. So this would call into question multiple of the additional equity risk premia, which have been raised earlier on during the session as well, that have been included in the application, because they would not be relevant to an entity, a state-owned entity such as SFF. And these include your project risk, your small stock premium, and your liquidity premium, particularly the latter two. NERSA, according to NERSA's methodology, those two are not allowed to be used together because it would in effect result in double counting of those risks. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here we present a slide on our revised calculation of of the allowable revenue, what we deem to be a reasonable value in this regard. So on the left, you can see the allowable revenue components that were utilized in the SFF application, and on the right, our proposal of a range of values that we deem to be reasonable. The issue about the RAB has been raised in this presentation already, with obviously lack of disclosure of the components of the RAB. We do, after the presentation by SFF this morning, potentially have a bit of an idea about what components might have been incorporated. We would argue that certainly no non-operational assets would be allowed to be included, and also I think would like to raise the question about including future capex spend for assets. So, for example, replacement of assets for the current application. We'd advise that NERSA gets a legal opinion on the viability and the validity of this. So, I mean, within that context, we've got a range of about 145 to 156 million. Our WACC, as explained previously, we've proposed a 0 to 0.66% WACC. The effect of this is that the allowable return on assets is around 1 million in an upper bound scenario, which is obviously significantly different from the 19 million rand, which was included in the application. Operating expenses, Stephen has spoken to already, so I won't dwell on that. In terms of depreciation, due to a lack of information disclosure, there's no disclosure of how the depreciation was calculated for comment, so we've left that as is for benefit of the doubt. However, we would like to raise the question as to why an asset which is 40 or more years old would still need to be depreciated, as it's very likely that the cost of this investment would have already been recovered over the period. Just to flag that as a caveat. In terms of the notional tax, we've left that as 0, which we deem to be very much appropriate for a non-profit entity. And then, as Stephen mentioned already, we identified a discrepancy in terms of the allowable revenue that was finally utilized in the tariff calculation. There was an unreconcilable amount in the order of 40 million, which we have removed. And the result of this is an allowable revenue which is less than 10% of that which was applied for. So here we present the impact of revising these components on the tariff. So just to sort of reiterate, the tariff that was applied for was 5 cents per litre.
Excuse me, just please be aware that your 30 minutes is up. But
thank you.
Just give you a chance to summarize quickly, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be 2 seconds on this slide and then head through to the conclusions. But essentially, when accounting for removing some of the components and revising the allowable revenue components to value or values that we deem reasonable, we see a 92% reduction in the tariff. Next slide, please. The volumes, we'd be happy to discuss this in further detail during the questions. We had to derive the volume quantum because it wasn't disclosed in the application. We see this to be about 3.6 billion litres. This seems to be in the order of OTMS's annual throughput, perhaps less, and we just wanted to flag that having volumes which might be in the tariff application would in effect implicate OTMS to shoulder the cost, which states that costs should be paid in proportion to the third party's needs. Just one more thing to highlight on the slide is that when considering an example question, we would propose that a reasonable loading tariff for the facility would be between 0.05 and 0.46 rand cents per litre, which, and this is important to emphasize, it's around 1 to 9% of the tariff which has been applied for by SFF. So just to conclude, this is our last slide. Once again, reiterate, has already said, we would argue that there's no rational basis for NERSA to approve the tariff that has been applied for, due to it being orders of magnitude higher than what we would, based on the evidence presented, deem to be a reasonable value. There are material errors, and we would certainly value additional information disclosure, without which there is really no, or it precludes substantially stakeholders from being able to meaningfully comment. It does not contemplate throughput capacity, either in proportion to third-party needs or in terms of the maximum throughput volume of the facility. And finally, and I guess just to emphasize this point, tariff for a company that is registered as a non-profit. So providing our last recommendations, we do recommend that the current tariff application be rejected, but we would strongly propose a more collaborative process going forward. This could involve NERSA engaging both SFF and OTMS to jointly develop an appropriate loading tariff, which volumes, reasonable costs, and reservation of capacity that on the one hand would allow SFF absolutely to recover its inefficiency of the loading facility. And we would hope compliant tariff application, which can be put before NERSA. Thank you very much.
I will then give the opportunity to panel members to ask questions thereto afterwards. But maybe even before the panel members come in, I think it would also help, especially I think it could help, not necessarily now, but in the process of responding, because you would, for example, if you've got a tariff for a pipeline, the customers of those pipelines would say this. Even we pose them for the purposes of also a general understanding of the public in terms of how things work together, how these things they get to the point of affecting them eventually. But I would just like to give panel members an opportunity to ask Mr. Sibanda again, and then Madam Advocate Stoller in that order. Over to you, Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thank you very much to TMS for those useful inputs and comments. Just a few questions from my side. So the CEO started off by indicating that the tariff that should be applied for or approved should be globally competitive. Thus, perhaps insinuating that this particular tariff is not. What I want to check is whether TMS has done any benchmarking, and if so, whether such work can be shared with the regulator to indicate where a globally competitive tariff should be in terms of the level. Secondly, there is also now, how do you reconcile this view? Should enable a licensee to recover the investment, operate and maintain the system, and make a profit commensurate with the risk. Now, there is no differentiation between a not-for-profit licensee and for-profit licensees. So how do you say if you maintain that SFF should not be earning a profit, and whereas Section 28 says the regulator must approve a tariff that allows for that profit. And then the next issue for me is around OPEX, the land rehabilitation costs, and the calculation of OPEX in that regard. Now, I want to check whether, to the extent that then that error is rectified, whether OTMS will then will change its view regarding the inflation of the operational costs, but also with respect to insurance. Are you proposing that SFF should then actual code of insurance, and if that is the case, or if there is one in place, would that then also change your view? Because you seem to be suggesting that those insurance costs are actually above what the market would likely charge. So if there were to be an actual code, would that then change your view regarding that issue? And then I wanted to check, you are proposing that we should use a RAP means of allocating costs. Quite a little bit more justification for that view, for using a RAP weighting to allocate. And then to share with us the tariff that OTMS is currently paying to SFF in terms of the contract that you have in place, and whether you're also in a position to share with us that particular contract. I think we would appreciate that. And then lastly, from my side, there's a lot of reference to lack of access to information that would allow, meaningful commentary by stakeholders, and certainly by OTMS. Now, would you agree that in the nature of such applications, there will be commercially sensitive information that particular had to be overcome? And to the extent that the information that you are referring to is actually commercially sensitive information, do you still maintain your view that you need access to that information, which in any case is actually confidential to you as a competitor or customer? Chairperson, I think I will then end it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Subanda. Don't know if you've got any questions, other members of the panel.
Chairperson, I think from my side, I've been covered by Mr. Subanda in terms of the contract issue. I think we will appreciate our manner, but we would like to understand some of the terms and conditions that are in that contract between OTMS and SFF. Chairperson, just one point of clarity from my side. There was an indication that SFF did not disclose the volumes in their application. And if I heard Ms. Reynolds, he mentioned some figures. So I just want to get an understanding as to how then, or how did she get to those calculations, and what are they based on? If they can just share with us the basis of that calculations that they've given on the volumes. I'll appreciate that clarity. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Advocate Story. Noting that there are no further questions from the Parliament members, let me just put two or so of mine, just for clarity. Some of the issues raised by my fellow panel members around SFF being a non-profit organization. I note the issue of the zero real return for its shareholders. Does that mean, particularly for this operation, there should also be a zero return in your understanding? If you can assist, because they can have a return that complies with in line with Section 28, but that does not accrue to the shareholders as such, because there are other costs that should be dealt with. And noting the role of state-owned entities in terms of us as a country being also a developmental state. I just want to get that understanding from your side, just to reflect on that, and the likelihood of the already burdened taxpayer to then help fund whatever initiative that this entity then goes into business on. So if you can help with that. And then related to the registered asset base weighting, the RAB weighting, I would I note Mr. Sibanda asked that you explain the fairness of using that. I would go further to say, if you would also, in a way of not defending something to the umpteenth degree, noting that nothing is 100% perfect in the space we're operating in, but what other alternatives do you think would be fair to consider, even when it comes to the different categories of cost, in terms of having a fair, maybe a bit fairer cost allocation? I would appreciate if you can just assist with that. And thirdly, if you may clarify in what manner is all pollution control double counting? I did not get that one clearly. If when it comes to the issue of double counting, I know that some of the questions might not necessarily be able to respond to them here and now, as I said earlier on to the earlier presenter, to SFF, that you've got the 7 days within which you may respond to our questions in writing, or argument, or whatever information you have provided up to now. And then the other issue that I would like, particularly from what Silas presented in terms of the tariff, that he said could be brought down to the level of about I think it's 0.46 cents per liter. I just would like to check if in that figure has she considered the issues of sustainability of the enterprise that has applied. Yeah, I think that would be all from my side. And as I said, just talk to these issues. We are open and would also actually appreciate your written comments within 7 days from the date of this hearing. Over to you, Madam Taylor and your team.
Thank you, Chair. I'm led to believe I can ask you to give me 3 minutes just to concur with my team so that we split up who's giving the answers. So if I can just get 2 minutes that we share our questions. We've been writing them down. I'm not the subject matter expert on all. Is that okay?
Well, so fair, we don't want to even make it 3 minutes. Let's make it 10 minutes. Just take a 10 minutes break, and then you can then have a chat and provide a response, because we believe that henceforth we're going to also to move quickly and towards wrapping up. Members of the panel, if that is agreeable with you, can we just take a 10 minutes break? We'll come 10 minutes on the dot and finish off our presentation. Thanks, Madam Simane, for the indication. Advocate, if you are happy, Mr. Sibanda.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. 10 minutes break.
I'm fine, Chairperson. Thanks.
Thanks, Advocate. We're getting ready to resume. Thanks to you panel members and all the attendees for your fairness in providing the OTMS team an opportunity to caucus and then revert to us with responses. So we've reconvened and off we go then. Madam Taylor and your team, you've got the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the questions. There's quite a number of them. So if I've missed anything, please feel free at the end to let me know that I have missed something. Let's start with, I think, the first one, which said, how does this affect us? So as I indicated when I started, that people bring crude to our storage facility because they have an intention to sell it globally. They are traders and they don't bring crude because it's nice to have crude in storage. They bring it because they're watching the price. And if you are storing crude, you are going to come and collect it immediately when the price of crude is higher than what you bought it for. And we don't just compete with SFF. We compete with these traders with every other person that has a storage facility in the world, which therefore means not only must we be competitive against SFF, we must be competitive with the rest of the world. Places like Fujairah, places like the Caribbean. Now, Saldanha is an interesting place because on an average day, a stranded vessel won't come to Saldanha. Why? Because just like you and I come from KZN. When I'm in Joburg, I drive on the N3. I only stop at the garage where I can refuel, I can use the bathroom, and I can have lunch. Because then I get in my car and I go to Durban. It's optimal. Saldanha is like a stop where you come in, you discharge, you can't refuel, there's no bunkering, you can't do anything else. So that leads to the next conversation on benchmarking across the world. That is a very difficult study to do. We've tried to do it, and actually we're trying to do it. What that forces us to become is price takers, because who sets the price for coming in and getting out is the client. The traders will say to you, I'll pay 2 cents more in the Caribbean. Why? because when my vessel is there, it can bunker, get some fuel oil in, and immediately when it leaves there, it can go to the next destination instead of stopping here, offloading, and doing a short trip up west or wherever else, or even actually to Durban, simply to bunker, and then only go to China. So those things matter. And I'm saying them because I'm trying to say that there's a supply chain here, and these are costs associated with it. Let's take the tariff that is projected today. I'm going to use the US $1 per barrel because that is how we work, 56 US cents per barrel. That's almost 3 times what a client pays for storage in a contango. For storage, not pipeline, not moving crude from the ship to the storage tank. For storage. That is, you will see it when you see our contract, and these are confidential pieces of data, so all other things can only be disclosed in that platform. But it's almost 3 times what a client will pay in a steep contango. That is why, for us, we're not saying SFF mustn't get a tariff. They need to get an economical tariff and a tariff that is sustainable. 56 US cents is 3 times the storage you pay for 1 million barrels of crude in a tank. If it's fine, OTMS will say our investment case, this is far beyond us. We can't do this because no clients will come to us. No clients will come to whoever decides to buy. The only people that can buy what if OTMS shuts down is SFF, because they're strategic, they're funded by the government, they don't have to go find lenders that are going to listen to 56 cents for pipeline fee. And so it will be locking out anything and anyone that can try to compete. You know, I had a slide that I didn't share here. I will share it actually when we do our written submission. And you see the cost of the port today, with the money we're paying today for oil pollution and for storage, that cost for SFF makes up about 46%. What is being requested here will mean that the cost for a vessel coming in, 90% of it goes to SFF. Then actually TNPA must become the owner of that loading facility and pipeline, and you'll see fairer distribution and growth in this country. It just doesn't make sense. I'll put it in and you can see the comparison. Let me then go to global competitiveness. I believe that I've tried to use this narrative to explain that point. Benchmarking, as I said, Chair, very challenging because Saldanha is unique in that it comes in and goes out. It's not even similar to Richards Bay and Durban because those ports can do a lot more for a vessel coming in and getting out. I love vessels, sorry, because actually I'm an operator by trade. I run terminals. And then non-profit. Chair, if I may, and to this question, can I make a request that OTMS responds in writing? It's complex. I need more time with my team so that we can respond properly.
That is acceptable. You may just proceed on that score. I think it's going to help. As I've already also indicated, you may even augment whatever you have responded to in this public hearing. You may proceed, ma'am.
Oh, Chair, let me also just clarify before I'm making 7-day commitments here. We haven't seen the response from SFF at all. I've never been to any of these, so if I'm asking a dumb question, please just bear with me. We would like to give all of our responses once. Does this 7 days, I won't see anything from SFF. I must just get on with my 7 days, or I'll get an opportunity to see what SFF has responded to so that I can respond after that based on 7 days starting from the day I get the SFF narrative. This is crucial for OTMS, so I don't want to get it wrong. I just want to know what the process will be. Okay. So that is fine, Chair. Then let's go to OPEX. There was a question that says there have been certain admissions from SFF we heard this morning on certain changes that would need to be made, would we then change our view? No? You're saying no to me? No. Oh, sorry. So let me try and maybe use this time to tell the regulator in our audience what is the principle for us on OPEX. The principle for our argument or for our position is based on this concept of efficiency. OTMS is not willing to take on inefficient costs by SFF. Our first point is that the costs that SFF is projecting here are inefficient. I am a storage operator. I've operated storage tanks, finished product. I'm operating a crude one now. These costs are inefficient. When you run a facility, you don't take the highest insurance that you get. As an example, we had the Durban strikes that we saw in the country create a lot of damage. Immediately, international insurers said to us, what was the increase percentage for us? 200%. They wanted to put a 200% increase on our insurance. I'm not being disingenuous, that's the truth. We fought to push it back, and I expect SFF as an operator to do the same, not to simply get 200% and say it's fine, we'll give 30% to OTMS. I believe that will defeat the very purpose of what we're trying to achieve here. Costs that are being brought here must be optimized and they must be efficient. And Chair, I want to also point out that if you saw in our presentation, maintenance cost, we said we're fine. Why? Because we did the homework and we saw that they correct. Those costs that they're projecting there for maintenance, SFF is correct. It's in the order of magnitude. We're not talking, I appreciate very much that costs, it's not easy to have a direct allocation all the time, but then there must be reasonability and order of magnitude must make sense. And they can use their maintenance cost as an example. Those costs make a lot of sense. I have run terminals for a long time, almost 15 years in my life. 12 operators for a vessel. 12 operators earning 33 million a year. I want to go work there. I will resign as the CEO and simply just go be an operator at SFF because that's a lot of money, Chair. And what I want from the OPEX of SFF is I want to see the efficient costs, not the inefficient costs. I have investors and lenders, Chair. And so I have a lot of pressure sitting here to make sure that I'm paying only for what I need to be paying for. Cost allocation. We got an application that had certain inputs, and all we did is we said, based on what is here, the most reasonable mechanism we can see is a mechanism of this is what the loading costs they're saying are, remembering, Chair, that even those we're saying are need to be adjusted. And we said a transparent, as I said, I want them to have a tariff. We are aligned with that, but I want an efficient tariff, not an inefficient tariff. So we can spend some time after what we've heard today and in our written submission if we think there's a different mechanism. We hold contracts. It's not a secret to NESA and anyone in the public with Astron Energy today. And labor, we do direct cost, utilities, direct cost. And anything after that, we go into a very hard commercial conversation of why is an HSE manager's cost, and I must say, I'm going to use this way to allocate the HSE manager's cost. It's very, very commercially driven, but you can't simply just say 30% and I'm going to accept it. Astron hasn't accepted that for me. They've accepted exactly 2% of my time in that contract. And it's what I'm looking for. When I see that robustness in the tariff and in its allocation, I will be very much willing to listen and to hear. But if I don't see that, I won't be able to. Okay. You asked PC, oil pollution cost. Oil pollution cost, Chair, refer to a vessel is standing alongside, and as you arm and there's a gush of a spill, something needs to be done, and TNPA requires of the operator, who is SFF, to make sure that there are booms and there's deployment of the right equipment. I pay US 6 cents already. I'm already paying US 6 cents. So if I'm already paying you the 6 cents, and again you're putting it in the tariff calculation to work out the volume now for loading and pipeline, that is double handling. It's just clear. It's not, and you will see it in the contract. I have the opportunity to go and find a different service provider for that cost. It's not part of regulated costs. So I don't expect to see it in this calculation. Okay. I'm missing a lot of things. Beg your pardon? Lack of access. Because the information is deemed to be confidential. I think in our written objection, we spoke to this piece, Chair. I believe we articulated our position. We believe that SFF is a state-owned company, and so a lot of the information should be public knowledge. And we believe that within NERSA, there is a clear process of handling confidential information. And if the regulator has handled it in the way that it should, we believe that as the most impacted and affected stakeholder here, who stands to lose 3.5 billion rand, we would appreciate access to the relevant information. It then goes to the calculation that was done for volumes and assumptions. If that information was transparently put up, we would have used those volumes, but in the absence of them, then you work it out. It's a simple calculation.
Yeah, Chair, maybe we should, there are two questions that I can see that relate to, or there's one for volumes that's specifically addressed to Celeste, and another on sustainability, which is also addressed to Celeste, which we could argue, answer, but I believe Celeste would be well positioned to do so if we can ask her to answer those two questions.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the volumes, is in relation to the measure of the information related to how we derived the tariff. Am I correct?
Yeah, how we derived the volume. So I believe
yes. Yes.
That's a
sure.
simple division calculation.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, at a high level, it's just taking what was stated in the application, so the allowable revenue, and then the tariff, which was disclosed in the application, to back calculate the volumes. But, I mean, on this point, and then also how we derived the impact on the tariff by revising some of the allowable revenue components and the volumes, etc. We will very happily provide that spreadsheet calculation with the written input as well, because I know there was a question around that. And then in terms of the sustainability of the tariff, yes, absolutely, that is contemplated. So I guess just to note again that the WACC that we assumed would be reasonable is in real terms, so 0 to 0.66% real WACC. The nominal WACC would absolutely contemplate inflation. Therefore, SFF should absolutely be able to cover its costs in an efficient manner, as Nonhlanhla has emphasized. But yeah, obviously this point about it not being able to generate a profit in addition, but absolutely it should be able to maintain its costs, and we'll provide more written information on the non-profit issue. There was one final point which I just quickly I'll pick up on. It was around the small stock the equity risk, additional equity risk premium. Chair, you raised a point around the small stock premium and the liquidity premium and the double counting. Perhaps I was not, I apologize if I wasn't clear, but so the small stock premium and the liquidity premium both address illiquidity issues in relation to the firm. And we note that in Nurse's version 4 methodology that it explicitly states that a liquidity premium is not allowed for government owned entities due to the fact that they don't face illiquidity as significant of illiquidity risks relative to smaller private firms. And furthermore, that Nurse's new methodology explicitly states that the liquidity premium will not be included anymore because the small stocks premium will account for all of those general illiquidity, or should account for all of those general illiquidity risks. I hope that clarifies. Thanks.
Chair, just to conclude then on some of the matters that were raised, I want to I'm being reminded that the sharing of the contract is subject to SFF agreement and undertaking from NESA to treat confidentially, please. That's just on the sharing of the contract that we have with SFF. There is one question I think I want to be explicit with, which is the tariffs. Our clients, who are the benchmark in essence of how we work, as I said, we're price takers. Our clients thus far, and I think Mr. Mzwake said this very well again, in 2020 was one of the steepest contangos that we have seen. If you go back to the slide that I showed up that shows the history of them, you will see that the dip in 2020 is exceptional, and it's short, naturally, because it wasn't the structure of the market. We're only willing to pay between 1 and 3 US cents for this pipeline. These are people that work with everyone across the world, and I can assure you, they moaned. And we simply passed this on to them. We don't make a cent from it. Costing them 56 cents, 3 times more than what they must actually pay when they have their product in my tank. You can do the math. You're not going to do it, and they're not going to do it either. So that is the fundamental impact in today, because that is what is at stake for us as OTMS. We would have, right at the beginning of this investment, wanted to build our own facility. Why? It's predictable. I don't have to have these fights. I don't have to not know. I can work around my efficiencies, and I can drive efficiency in my plant. Our business is a cent per barrel business. Every cent in our business means something. It makes a decision in a person's mind whether they want to be here or they want to be somewhere else. That's just the reality. Just like how for finished product, it's a cents per liter matters. It's no different here. Every cent matters. And we have made this investment because we believe we've done the homework. If we operate optimally and efficiently, we bring a lot of value to the economy. One party taking all the cake is not how economies are grown. So I just want to put it to this audience that we're here today because our investment works, but it works when we are efficient, not when we're being handed over the inefficiencies of SFF. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your responses, as already indicated, and you have, in a way, acceded to the request to submit the information within the 7 days period from to date. With that, taking that there are no follow-up questions, this then ends the part of OTMS's presentation and responses to questions raised. I would like to give an opportunity to SFF just to have an overall response before moving to closure. Over to you, Mr. Mzwake Ngwane.
Closing comments on the presentation. So that is really one of the things that we find so strange in their opposition of our application, because those that maintenance activities are done by the labor team, by the maintenance team. The rate, of course, we did indicate that it is never the intention of SFF to come up with a high tariffs that will shut down and we still, I mean, we were very sort of quick to point out that when we went through the model again, we did spot out that there is this big cost element that has not been analyzed, which should be analyzed in our cost. Obviously, cost, I think it looks like it's one of the areas that OTMS feels that it needs to be taken outside the belief the famous, but we agree that they will be paying. That's what they are paying, and to wait until we finalize we really to really come to an end. We can start working as a sort of the neighbors and the same market, and we provide should be no reasons why we cannot coexist. And as I mentioned, our last tariff result, because we have a risk of starting to get this together, and so we don't want the things that will be coming from this level. And the chair was busy cutting a line, doing a hot welding with, so which means that we have a tank, a pipeline with crude oil, and changing the pipe. So I'm ready making the statement to a meeting and provide whatever data. Of course, we will test it with the confidentiality and find a way to resolve the issue that we have in Saldanha before it becomes and it explodes in the art. Thanks, Chairperson, and thank you for the Commission for inviting us to be part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ngwane. I think I must state that one of the most crucial we've done looking at the improvement of the sectors that we regulate. And I'm expecting and knowing that other listeners and viewer alignment, that areas of relevant or applicable customers or clients are duly consulted, brought on board, need to always ensure. At the same time, I must also say that the regulation is for the good of South Africa Incorporated, as well as taking due cognizance of its citizens, the private citizens, as well as the corporate citizens. It is also the private sector and private citizens that must ensure that they assist in the efficiency and effectiveness of state-owned and the importance to emphasize suppliers in terms of that there's competition, but at this, and I must say that I noted also, Mr. Ngwane, that at the end you raised a new issue, which I think that although OTMS might feel we share information that we've tried to verify amongst ourselves or between our entities before coming to this platform to avoid leaving a wrong perception that maybe certain things have been done without following due process or following the procedures that relate to safety, health aspects. But I note everything that has been presented. I am looking forward to getting your written submissions provided to NERSA within the 7 days. It's got a monopoly of wisdom, and it is the collective that working together will help not only this industry, but even the whole country forward. I will opportunity, and then we will get the written response so that we can close this session from the side of OTMS, appreciating also in terms of giving us the slides. That is always helps for the applicant to present necessarily the recipients of the applications. I will also my fellow panel members. Thank you very much for your questions and in which you have assisted to make this public hearing a success in terms of the intention to solicit information from the applicant and all those affected or interested. The NERSA management and staff, thank you very much. I'm also looking forward to a further analysis based on the information that is going to come through from the presenters today. And I'm thanking them also in advance in that regard. To all the attendees, everyone that is following us on various platforms, thank you very much, because that is also indicative of your interest in seeing this sector improving, as well as our beloved country as a whole, I mean, moving in the right direction. With those words, thanks to.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.